The winner to organize the 2022 FIFA World Cup is Qatar.
After almost 12 years of the 2022 World Cup being mired in controversy, Qatar will become the first country in the Middle East to host the World Cup. The largest football spectacle gracing Middle Eastern soil for the first time has resulted in Qatar having the largest infrastructure project in World Cup history. Qatar is the smallest country by area to host a FIFA World Cup. The next smallest is Switzerland, which hosted the 1954 FIFA World Cup. Qatar became the second country to host the premier event without ever qualifying in its previous editions. Preparing the tiny desert nation for the tournament has come with an alarming human toll, and it has prompted many to criticize FIFA for rewarding problematic behavior. The bid to FIFA was a bold gamble, as characterized by Qatar, to bring world football to the Gulf nation. But this bold move was underwritten by an estimated $200 billion plus infrastructure package that at the time was deemed vital to national interest and foreign policy objectives. Hosting a FIFA World Cup is an expensive affair no nation backs off when it comes to costs associated with the iconic tournament. The expenses have been on a largely upward trend since 1994. The 1994 FIFA World Cup cost $500 million. Costs spiraled into the billions right after the World Cup was held in France in 1998. Even though South Africa had to build most of the stadiums from scratch, it was surprisingly inexpensive to them and set them back $3.6 billion. Brazil was on top of this list until now. Brazil spent a whole $15 billion and Russia $11.6 billion in 2018. Qatar, on the other hand, has reportedly spent over $229 billion on the largest infrastructure project in World Cup history. But the sum reaches sky-breaking values only if you take into account the cost of building new stadiums and renovating existing ones, and also all the money spent on infrastructure. The cost of the previous World Cups appear to be minuscule at $4.3 billion. Costs associated with Qatar's new stadiums have been reported in the range of $6.5 billion to $10 billion, a significant increase from the proposed $4 billion in the initial bid, and a metro system that serves 5 of 8 venues cost another $36 billion. The oil-rich nation is about the size of Yorkshire, with 2.8 million residents in the country, but its size makes Qatar the richest in the world in terms of per capita. The country has spent over $200 billion. They have built a new city, Lusail, to conduct the finals of the World Cup. The last game will be held here in Lusail, which makes this venue impressive. It is worth the money and has met expectations. The exterior design replicates bowls, vessels, and other art pieces of the Arab and Islamic world. With a reported cost of $767 million, its construction began in 2017, and it will be opened for the finals. This bulk sum has not been assured by Qatari officials, but the country has spent $500 million every week on construction, infrastructure, hospitals, hotels, airports, and several new stadiums. So, the total rounds to about $220 billion. While the event is expected to cost that much, Qatar expects an economic impact of only $17 billion from the tournament. There's no accurate answer when you talk about whether or not this absurd expense will pay off. Nearly 2.9 million tickets have already been sold, and fans are all packed for the sandbox. But despite securing tickets, some fans are reluctant to attend due to travel expenses and the lack of things to do when matches aren't taking place. David Beckham has been adopted as an ambassador by Qatar for this very reason. This charming face has signed a £150 million deal to become the face of the Qatar World Cup. Fans have not held back in criticizing David for this move, as there are widespread concerns surrounding Qatar's poor human rights record and the country's intolerance towards same-sex relationships, which are illegal in the Arab state. Beckham was reassured that fans would be allowed to display rainbow flags in stadiums during next year's tournament, but whether or not they're talking the truth, we'll soon know. Getting back to the $200 billion, they're not spending it in the World Cup alone. 95% of that cost is for Qatar's broader 2030 plan. Qatar has rebuilt itself in the name of this tournament. While the World Cup has spurred these projects along, the $210 is a large investment for the long term. These include the construction of an innovation hub with hotels, a sophisticated metro network, stadiums, and airports. While the costs of the new stadiums in Qatar are only in the order of $6.5 billion to $10 billion, it is still a significant increase on the $4 billion originally proposed. Talented citizens in the sport and tech industries from Qatar make their way to the United States and larger European cities like London. To combat this trend, Qatar is actively working by building world-class facilities at home. The stadiums alone are not the only need for a World Cup. A country has to show they can go beyond the stadiums themselves to make and succeed in a World Cup bid. For the moment, it's rush hours for the hosts and the soccer fans who will descend upon the Gulf country for the month-long football carnival. The country recently relaxed its entry rules after authorities originally announced that only those with match tickets would be allowed to enter Qatar during the World Cup. Qatar, like other wealthy Gulf micronations, never does anything halfway. The country is immensely wealthy and is not at all shy of flaunting it. Hospitals have been built to fulfill the criteria of a minimum level of hospital beds available, along with hotel beds, which have a minimum of 60,000 according to FIFA. Qatar promised 100,000 and it has delivered as such. They are also using cruise ships and desert camps, along with residential homes. 80% of the accommodation is already booked by FIFA, and the left is now to be utilized by the fans. With hotel room availability at a premium, organizers have hired a third cruise ship to house the seemingly ravenous demand for space from fans. They've built a massive road network in Doha, which used to be gridlocked at times. They have built the metro from scratch, along with several brand new airports. To host services such as immigration and customs, policing, armed forces, hotels, retail, medical staff, transport, and a host of other services, skilled people have been hired. A strong police and security force has been trained that can continue to protect the resident population, while also having control of the crowd on the level and sophistication of the police forces in Europe and the US, and protect fans and tourists. All of this is happening in one of the most volatile regions in the world, the most public event in the world. It is a massive undertaking that all these costs are ultimately borne by the Qatari government. Countries that have hosted World Cups have had the core of all of the above in place through investment over decades. Qatar is doing it from scratch, which has brought this kind of eye-soaring number. FIFA is covering the entire operational cost of the World Cup, while the infrastructural improvements are in the hands of the host country. The stadium and other resources will not be best utilized after the World Cup are over. To enable the host country to continue to benefit from the tournament for years to come, FIFA created a $100 million legacy fund. This will support football infrastructure development projects, youth football and women's football, as well as public health and social programs. The World Cup has always been a summer event, but this time it is weeks before Christmas and towards the end of the current year. It has moved due to the intense summer heat, but it has caused both fixture congestion and players missing out to injury. Qatar, even in winter, has a hot climate, and players will struggle to play in humid conditions of 35 degrees at least. This has doubled the cost of stadiums and other infrastructures, as AC had to be fitted in everywhere. Qatar is roughly the size of the Canary Islands, so no doubt it will be packed like sardines during the tournament, especially in the cities like Doha and Lusail. This is why Qatar has shuttle flights ready to have easy access to neighboring countries. People have opposed Qatar to hosting this event, mainly because of the infamous ways it treated its workers, building the stadiums like slaves, with many working in Victorian-like conditions and thousands losing their lives as well as many getting low pay. Qatar has been the talk of the town not only for its high cost, but above all for human rights violations. The failure of Qatari authorities to investigate the deaths of thousands of migrant workers and other vicious crimes makes Qatar an easy target for the mob. If 4,000 plus workers are dying to earn daily wages, then it won't be the event we have been waiting for. The sad thing is that once the World Cup ends, no one will even remember how many lives were sacrificed just to host a tournament. The World Cup is the chief form of entertainment in many countries across the world. The game provides the host country with a lot of pride and publicity, but this does not justify the extent of economic costs that have to be incurred to host the World Cup. Several countries have fallen into debt traps after holding the World Cup. South Africa, which held the Football World Cup in 2010, would be a prime example. The economic benefits of the FIFA World Cup are still often cited by the mainstream media. The reality is that the upside, if any, is vastly overstated. While the economic impacts will be seen in the coming days, the World Cup has certainly brought greater attention to Qatar's human rights record. Numerous investigative reports have highlighted the abuse of migrant workers during preparations for the World Cup. With the increase in international awareness and perhaps to protect its image and gains in security, Qatar has issued new procedures and mechanisms to promote migrant worker rights that are either unprecedented in the region or have since been followed by other countries. The World Cup will likely have optimum impacts on Qatar. The seminal event promises to provide short-term and long-term economic benefits and the potential for soft power gains. However, doubt arises over the country's ability to effectively operate the infrastructure it has built after the event. These concerns have been addressed to some extent, and mechanisms will be implemented to address them, notably building infrastructure with the intent to be repurposed and introducing region-leading reforms to its migration policies. Performances and players are what make the World Cup great, more than the stadiums. That said, the transformative nature of a sporting event of such a large magnitude goes beyond immediate economic effects, and the intangible nature of these benefits should be taken into consideration when considering its legacy.